So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
This morning, marking a milestone. President Trump's first 100 days in the White House, his accomplishments, his failures, and what lies ahead. We'll hear what our panel of political analysts have to say.
This is the Emmy Award-winning 11 News Close-Up with your host, Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Ever since Franklin Roosevelt pledged to turn the country around in 100 days, that number has been seen as a marker to measure a president's ability to make good on his campaign promises. Recent polls have shown that Trump has the lowest approval rating of any new president since polling began back in 1945. Take a look. He's at 42% compared to President Obama's 61% after 100 days, 56% for George W. Bush, and 52% for President Clinton. Now, despite the low ratings in the polls, Trump has given himself high marks, boasting that he has accomplished more in his first 100 days in office than any other president. But he has failed to achieve much in Congress, focusing mostly on signing executive orders to roll back Obamacare, impose travel bans on immigration and climate policy. Corey Chambers takes a look at some of the highlights of President Trump's first 100 days.
It's 100 days of promises colliding with political reality. It started with a staggering loss.
On my first day, I'm going to ask Congress to send me a bill to immediately repeal and replace. Repeal and replace. Repeal and replace that horror show called Obamacare.
That pledge brought surefire applause on the campaign trail, but calamity in office. Even with Republicans in control of Congress, they still found themselves bitterly divided. The president's first attempt at major legislation was yanked without a vote.
I will not sugarcoat this. This is a disappointing day for us.
Despite continued talk about a pledge to build a border wall and have Mexico pay for it,
The wall gets built, 100%.
there is no concrete progress on that front. The president has signed more legislation than any of the previous 5 presidents in the same period, much of it erasing Obama-era regulations. But none of it produced the broad public impact typical of major laws. For that, he has turned to executive actions, signing more than any other president in the first 100 days since Harry Truman, quickly wiping out the trade deal known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
We just officially terminated TPP.
But his most controversial idea was banning travel from several nations with a Muslim majority. That is stalled in the courts. The judicial branch of government is where President Trump has scored by far his biggest victory.
We have to replace Judge Scalia with a conservative, great judge.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch.
Despite overwhelming Democratic opposition, Neil Gorsuch was approved and seated on the Supreme Court.
And I got it done in the first 100 days. That's even nice.
Meanwhile, on the foreign affairs front, President Trump reversed on a campaign promise not to intervene in Syria, taking fast action following a Syrian gas attack, unleashing a barrage of missiles in Syria, and the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, raising tensions not merely in the Middle East, but also with far-flung allies and adversaries, including North Korea.
Quite a tumultuous 100 days. To get a mixed evaluation of Trump's 100 days, pleased to have with us this morning our political gurus. Jeannie Zaino is professor of political science at Iona College and strategy advisor at Applied Economics. Morgan Pekma is executive director of the think tank Effective New York and co-host of Effective Radio on AM 970. And we have political strategist Hank Scheinkopf, who has had represented over the years Republican as well as Democratic candidates. So good to have you with us. So let's get right to it. Let's hear from each of you your assessment of Donald Trump's 100 days as president.
Well, the way I always judge it is by policy, and when you look at it by policy outcome, it is a very bad first 100 days for the president. By his own marker, in October, he released the 10 points, his contract for America, that he was going to try to achieve. So far, health care repeal and replacement, up and down, hasn't done that. And he has put forward a tax plan that's about 1 page maybe, and doesn't even have a piece of legislation accompanying it. So if you look at by his own measure, it's been a very bad 100 days.
I think the president has shown himself to be inept in wielding the power of his office, that he had misunderstood what the presidency entailed coming into office. That being said, he did have a tremendous triumph with getting Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch approved. And in a lot of ways, he stayed out of that process. That's why that confirmation went along so smoothly. But he has accomplished a great deal through executive orders, and because the presidency has been so expanded in its ability to act autonomously, he was able to do a lot of things both in military interventions and in just signing executive orders. So it's been a very eventful 100 days.
I want to pick up on each of those issues, but let's go to Hank first.
I think you have to give him credit for foreign policy activity. I think the moral and the brave move in Syria was very significant. It restores the moral basis of our foreign policy, which America seems to have lost. But the attack in Yemen, that was a disaster early on, where a wonderful SEAL, a young, terrific sailor rather, lost his life unnecessarily, probably is not fair. On the domestic side, he cannot figure out how to deal with Congress. He is an executive. He fits the notion of the imperial presidency more than anybody we've had probably since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There is no discussion about what occurs. He believes somehow that this is run like a corporation. There is no corporation running this government. It is a mess. It always has been a mess. But the president's job and the chief of staff's job is to rationalize it. They have not been capable of doing that.
All right, so a grade, A, B, or C?
Oh, I'd give him a C or lower.
Maybe C+.
I think Morgan's right. I think C+ is
C+,
accurate.
okay. Now, see, is the problem been that he's tried to accomplish too much too fast to give the voters what he had promised he was going to give them?
Nah, the problem is he doesn't know how to get it accomplished. The learning curve here is significant, and it's not that he is likely a good or a bad man. We don't think about things that way. He just doesn't understand how this works. It doesn't work like coming up with a budget for a project you're going to develop, telling the subcontractors what to do, shaving points off their cost, coming up with another way to do it, dealing with lawyers and land use. It doesn't work that way. This is not a trademark
case. He can't even get the support of his own party. I mean, he got, yes, Gorsuch was very important for the Supreme Court, but it got through the nuclear option. So he didn't have that full support of his party behind him.
He doesn't have the full support. And I will tell you, this is nothing new. The modern presidency has been this way. Presidents come into office, they overpromise and they underdeliver, and he is victimized by that. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, as you mentioned, he boasts an awful lot. And so if you compare what he's saying he's going to do or has done to what's actually happened, you have a huge gap. Barack Obama overpromised as well, but he started to pull back as he got into office. And so Donald Trump has to learn that he can't run this thing like he ran his own corporation. And it's not going to work that way. He needs his party, and he doesn't have their support.
Now, every president enjoys a honeymoon period, but you told us months ago, when we were talking before the election, that you didn't expect Donald Trump to have a honeymoon.
I didn't expect him to have one, and I don't think he has had one. And, I actually think that is to the detriment of all of us.
Well, Trump has done nothing to try to win over Democrats, so he's really stuck with his own party, and he hasn't shown an adeptness at navigating his party. It's exactly what Hank was saying. It's not a problem that he has an ambitious agenda. It's that he doesn't know how to accomplish it. On one side, he has been so aggressive in trying to ramrod his agenda through Congress, but on the flip side, at times when he really needed to show strength, he took a back seat to Congress, and so he hasn't shown that he understands how the channels of government work.
We are relying too much, I think, on the notion of what a political party is or is not. We don't have one or two political parties anymore. We have about 6. We have a Senate political party. We have a Democrat Senate political party. We have a House that has caucuses that see themselves as independent entities. We have different cultures functioning at the same time. The president really isn't a Republican. He's not their guy. The House Democrats are worthless. I mean, they're a different party, and they're factionalized. We have a government that is entirely factionalized, balkanized, and can't seem to get anything done. Trump is the victim of that moment, and people are elected based upon the culture and the politics of that particular time. Okay. He fits the chaos.
We're going to take a break. We come back, talk about the health care, immigration, tax reform, so much more as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us. Back with Jeannie Zaino, Morgan Peckma, and Hank Scheinkopf talking about Donald Trump's 100 days. His biggest loss appears to have been repeal and replace Obamacare. He promised his voters, his constituency, that was going to be his priority. He lost that big time, and he's still trying to resurrect that. How do you assess that?
I think it was a horrible mistake to start with. First of all, you never make the promise that you're going to repeal and replace an entitlement, because there's going to be people on the losing end of that. That was never a starter. He made the promise. There's no way he could have kept it. The promise failed. He should have at very least started with tax reform or infrastructure or something that he had a hope of, to Morgan's points, pulling Democrats along with and moving it forward. Healthcare is a non-starter. It's not going to happen. They should abandon it, but the problem is they've run 2012, 2014, 2016 now on this, so they're in a real conundrum there, and it's not just the president, it's the entire Republican Party, quite frankly.
So even trying to resurrect it is not going to succeed.
It's not going to succeed.
Morgan, what do you think?
I think that it's really hard for him, as Hank was saying before, because on one side he has the House Freedom Caucus and then he has the Republican moderates, and he really needs to have both of those coalitions on board in order to repeal and replace, and that doesn't seem to be that he can construct a bill that can make it happen, nor did he have the patience to work through a bill and to craft it over many months. That's what Speaker Ryan wanted to do, but Trump wanted to just ram it through, and so he was unwilling to go through the conventional process.
He doesn't understand you don't ram things through Congress. What he really needs also is a chief of staff. They need to make major changes in the structure of that White House. There's a new book out on chiefs of staff. It is very important to have somebody who can guide the process. There is nobody there that can do it, and this is kind of like a theatrical show produced by many people with no hole to it. There's no way to get out of it. They're stuck.
In the minus column also the big loss was the immigration, his travel ban, which got shot down by one judge, and then his ban or trying to cut back funds for sanctuary cities that harbor undocumented immigrants.
Sure.
That got shut down by another judge. Two other losses. How serious is this considered on his first 100 days?
Well, these were just incompetently written executive orders. They weren't properly vetted by lawyers. Trump has not staffed up his administration and put in all the bureaucrats, all the people who understand how the wheels turn. And of course, those were humongous losses for him, but he has no one to blame other than himself. And it's easy to point the finger at the judiciary, but these were things that were essentially written on the back of a napkin and handed in. And of course, they were struck down.
But you can't, I mean, to a certain extent, the American public is to blame. What do you expect when you put somebody in office who is running against his own party? Then you're not going to be able to staff up with insiders from Washington, D.C. who understand how the process works. You're stuck with people who have no idea. And the result is what both Hank and Morgan have been saying. They can't make their process work with the legislature because they have nobody in there who understands how this process works. And this is what happens. So to a certain extent, there's nothing surprising about this.
To even extend the argument further, he just doesn't understand the culture of the United States Senate. And he's on a collision course with them. Why? You cannot call the so-called judges, federal judges, so-called judges, because the judiciary is a subsidiary of the United States Senate. Nobody gets there without them. You cannot interfere and decide you're going to change treaty obligations of the United States of America without at least input from those senators, because the treaty obligations and the foreign policy of this country belongs to the U.S. Senate. So now he's interfered with their culture twice. That is not going to work out very well, because Mitch McConnell's waiting and gunning for him. If he interferes with those 2018 elections, there's going to be a confrontation between the two of them, which won't work out well for the president.
And now he's turning to another pledge, tax reform. And that's gotten off to not a very auspicious start.
I mean, this was just another ill-conceived plan that he is trying to put forward in broad strokes, and he thinks that that everyone will coalesce around it. But again, he needs to build coalitions, he needs to find consensus, and there's an unwillingness to do it. And a lot of this was driven by this arbitrary deadline of 100 days. It's like, I have to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And unfortunately, now he's really going to be in a pickle, because how is he going to walk all this back? How is he going to explain the fact that he tried to have this giant push all up to today, and then it all went nowhere?
How significant is this 100-day marker?
It's a great thing that Franklin Roosevelt needed for a nation that was in very serious trouble and potentially collapsing. What this guy has done is made this his marker because he wants to be as great as those that went before him. But the problem is he's never served in government. He's never served in the military. He doesn't understand how this all works, and it is not what he thinks it is.
And Marvin, the presidency is a marathon, not a sprint. And when you approach it like a sprint, you are just going to get winded and not be able to move forward.
And he said in an interview this week with Reuters that the job is harder than he ever anticipated. He's working harder than he has in his life, and he feels like he's in a vacuum, that he has no privacy, and he misses driving a car.
Boo-hoo.
Let's go back to the tax reform. The key points he has in that would be reduce corporate tax 35% to 15%, would reduce tax brackets from 7 to 3, would eliminate the estate tax, and would lower individual tax rates. Now, of course, we hear the Democrats and all those other critics who say this is going to benefit the rich and the middle class. Even though he's going to eliminate and repeal the alternative minimum tax, the middle class are really not going to benefit much. Is that correct?
This is a complete giveaway to rich people and to large corporations. And the problem is, not only is it so offensive to the core value of Democrats, but it's actually really offensive to what has been put forward as a core value of Republicans, which is fiscal responsibility. This is going to create, if it gets through in any form, it would create the most massive deficit in our country's history, which would, undermine the entire platform of the Republicans' economic strategy.
There's no quick action expected on this one, particularly from the Democrats.
Absolutely not. And, this, again, is the problem. He's got to cobble together a coalition in the House and a support in the Senate to get anything done. You can't reform the tax code all at once. He should take pieces that he can find support for, start to get some successes under his belt, and try to move forward. But he seems to be driven by this idea that he needs to get ratings and he needs to get public approval. So he's just throwing everything out there and hoping something sticks. And unfortunately, it's not going to pan out. He has not one success except maybe Neil Gorsuch, if you count that, and maybe Syria, if you support that. Of course, Syria was a total flip-flop on what he promised during the campaign.
I want to go back to something Morgan said a moment ago. Those points are very important. The populist moment does not mean protecting the rich. The populist moment means hurting the rich and redistributing wealth, regardless of what the Republicans may be saying. In those districts in which these guys were elected, the anger about the rich, about New York, Los Angeles, the control of the monetary system, and Wall Street didn't mean that Donald Trump should go in and give them more. What it meant is that he ought to give them less and he ought to give more to them. Now, people can say that's not what this is about, but you're not going to win elections in marginal districts or even in districts where Republicans should do well if you're giving money back to the people who everybody voted against. It's really simple. You can't do this. He was supposed to be the clarion of the populist moment, that this is going to change, we're going to punish these guys. But he didn't, and he's not.
We got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about a little more about foreign policy, a little more about successes beyond his Supreme Court nominee, and also what's the future hold for him. We'll be right back. In the past 100 days, President Trump has been fodder for the late-night talk hosts and comedians and The Simpsons, which in an episode 17 years ago predicted a Trump presidency. Here's a clip from the latest episode.
100 days in office, so many accomplishments, lowered my golf handicap, my Twitter following increased by 700, and finally, we can shoot hibernating bears. My boys will love that.
Sir, here's a new bill that you must read immediately. It lowers taxes for only Republicans.
Can't Fox News read it and I'll watch what they say?
No, you have to read it.
Oh, boy. Lots of fun for the comedians. And also, his relationship with the media has been abysmal. Is any chance of that ever turning around? I mean, he's been attacking everyone in the media.
Well, there's been an absolute lack of transparency by the administration, and there's been outright hostility toward the media. So unless the administration changes both the way that it operates and its tenor and how it deals with the media, it will persist in being a bad relationship.
Has the media been unfair, do you feel, towards him?
It depends on the media outlet, but certainly the Trump administration has done nothing to help its cause.
What do you think, Hank?
It's a mess. He's counting on the fact that print media doesn't matter anymore, and the fact is it does because it gets put up on the web. And he's not understanding that reporters have a job to do. If it is not good news, he thinks it's all a gossip column, that it ought to be in the gossip columns. His life is a gossip column, but this is not a gossip column. This is real reporters, real places, not items, but real things that are happening that have to get covered, and for people who have responsibility believing that they have to inform the American public, not tell them what Donald Trump thinks.
Now, if President Trump was watching this broadcast now, he'd say, you see, they're focusing on all the negatives. So we talked about the one major positive was he did win the Supreme Court, Gorsuch. Any other positives we can talk about?
You know, I think you look at that 98% of the people who voted for him who tell pollsters that they are happy they voted for him and they like what he is doing so far. Now, whether that holds or not is another question, but he still has tremendous support in his base, and I think that's something that is noteworthy. And I would say another positive, you know, the press complains a lot about Donald Trump and vice versa, but let's not pretend the press has done very, very well under Donald Trump. Ratings are way up, readership is way up, viewership is way up. So that is a boon for the press, and the president is somebody who likes ratings and admires them. He thinks it's a boon for him. It's certainly not a boon for the presidency.
Now,
though.
while his ratings are low, there's been another poll shows the general mood of the country is that this country is moving in the right direction, according to the latest polls.
Well, I mean, polls are very hard to divine any type of like rational underpinning. But in response to your question, Marvin, about whether he's been successful, it depends on your perspective. He has gutted environmental regulations. He has gutted animal protections. He has rammed through the Keystone Pipeline, pulled us out of TPP. So, I mean, those can be pointed to as accomplishments depending upon where you stand. Personally, I am adamantly against a lot of those things, but that when I said he had a C+, I was talking about effectiveness, not in terms of, you know, our personal opinion.
He is quickly running out of the ability in the agencies he controls to make the changes he talked about the campaign trail. It is going to get to legislation and change in that way. If he doesn't do, in my view, if he does not do the infrastructure plan as quickly as possible, he'll lose the ability to grab the first year of his presidency and turn it into something.
He's had somewhat of a learning curve, but he hasn't yet, as an outsider, learned how to play the political game in Washington.
No, absolutely not. Nor does he give any indication that he's interested in learning. I mean, that's a real problem. All presidents have a learning curve, but this is somebody from totally outside of politics who shows no indication that they want to learn. And again, I would just say that's not a surprise. He gave us very little indication during the campaign he had any interest in, you know, really thinking about public policy in any concerted way, and that's come to fruition.
I want to talk about the cloud that still hangs over his administration, because you still have that investigation going into whether or not Russia was meddling in the election. Also, his contacts with the Russian ambassador and other officials. Where is that going, and what do you expect coming in the months ahead?
That is a extremely important dark cloud that is hanging over the administration. The Russian collusion investigation is not going anywhere. All the potential problems with conflicts of interest through his business affairs is another very serious issue. These are things that he's been able to keep somewhat at bay, but these will be persistent problems until they are firmly resolved with some sort of, you know, vindication by, on the president's part, and that doesn't seem to be coming. I would expect that some of the people, particularly former NSA Chief Michael Flynn, is clearly in very serious trouble.
Now let's talk very briefly about foreign policy. Has he put us on a war footing with North Korea?
His whole argument about making America great again and making us first gets him into trouble. What about North Korea? We've been on a war footing with North Korea since the failure to resolve the treaty between the two Koreas in 1953. So when you get close to Panmunjom, you're going to have a disaster every time. The problem that he knows, and he does, or maybe he doesn't understand, is that the most difficult problem he's going to have to deal with, militarily and otherwise, and with China and Russia, is North Korea. And all our eyes are focused there. We have a nuclear war. That's where it begins.
As we have just a few moments to wrap up, I'd like to ask each. He's had a bumpy start. What do you see for the months ahead for President Trump?
I think it only gets bumpier. And, you know, this is a, you know, not a real 100 days doesn't really mean anything. And yet it does, because it gets tougher for presidents. This is a honeymoon. It gets tougher. And he has no real support within his own party to move legislation forward. And that's key.
What Hank was saying is that he certainly has to surround himself with a whole different group of people who understand how the presidency works and how he navigates in Washington, but he would have to be self-critical to do that, and he hasn't shown the capacity to be that way.
I love this country, and I think he'll come to some conclusion about restaffing, reorganizing, and trying to make something of it. Is it going to work out long term? If he continues on this path with the Senate, it's not going to work out very well.
Hank Scheinkoff, Morgan Peckma, Jeannie Zaino, always a pleasure to get your insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
And that'll do it for our program this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website, pix11.com/News Closeup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.